They say success is the best revenge. But sometimes, revenge is a front-row seat to your enemy's destruction. When Mark Sterling sent a wedding invitation to his struggling ex-wife, Elena, he did it to humiliate her, to show her exactly what she had lost. He thought she was still the broken woman he walked out on 3 years ago. What he didn't know was that the woman he was mocking wasn't just surviving. She was the secret owner of the multi-billion-dollar conglomerate he worked for. And she wasn't coming to the wedding to toast the happy couple. She was coming to burn his entire world to the ground. This is the story of how a CEO played the long game. The rain in Manhattan didn't just fall, it felt like it was trying to erase the city. Inside the humid warmth of Bean and Leaf, a small crowded coffee shop on 4th Avenue, Elena Vance sat in the back corner. She wore an oversized grey hoodie, faded jeans, and glasses that kept sliding down the bridge of her nose. To the casual observer, she looked like a tired freelancer or a graduate student drowning in debt. She was typing furiously on a battered laptop, her eyes scanning a complex spreadsheet involving mergers and acquisitions for the Southeast Asian sector. "Elena? Is that? Wow, it is you." The voice was familiar. It was a voice that used to whisper promises in the dark and shout insults in the light. Elena stopped typing. She didn't flinch, but her fingers hovered over the keys for a second too long before she slowly looked up. Standing there, dripping wet in a trench coat that probably cost more than the coffee shop's monthly rent, was Mark Sterling. He looked good. Annoyingly good. His jawline was sharper, his hair perfectly styled despite the weather, and on his wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch that he was making a conscious effort to display. "Mark," Elena said, her voice flat. She closed her laptop lid just enough to obscure the screen. "It's been 3 years." 3 years and 2 months, Mark corrected, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He grabbed a chair without asking and spun it around, straddling it backwards, a power move he'd likely picked up from a How to Be an Alpha podcast. "You look comfortable." Eleanor adjusted her glasses. "I'm busy, Mark. What do you want?" "Straight to the point. I always liked that about you. Well, I liked it until it became boring." He laughed at his own joke. "I was actually in the area meeting with some investors for the upcoming merger. Big things happening at the firm. But I saw you through the window and thought, why not?" He reached into the inner pocket of his coat and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold leaf. He slid it across the sticky table, pushing aside Eleanor's lukewarm latte. "I'm getting married, Eleanor." Eleanor looked at the envelope. Mark Sterling and Jessica Thorne. She knew the name. Jessica Thorne was the daughter of a minor senator, a socialite whose Instagram feed was a curated museum of vanity. "Congratulations," Elena said, making no move to take the envelope. "Why are you giving this to me?" Mark leaned in, his cologne, Santal 33, overpowering the smell of roasted beans. "Because I'm a big enough man to let bygones be bygones. And honestly, Elena, I want you to see that I'm doing well. I want you to see that that moving on was the right choice for me. Jessica is, well, she's a partner. Someone who fits my world." The implication hung in the air like smoke. "You didn't fit my world. You were trash." "You want me to come to your wedding to witness your upgrade," Elena translated, her expression unreadable. "I want you to come and enjoy the open bar," Mark smirked. "It's at the plaza next Saturday. Black tie. Try to find something nice at a thrift store, maybe. Or I can have Jessica send over something she was planning to throw out. She has a lot of last season Gucci." Elena felt a flare of heat in her chest, but she extinguished it instantly with ice-cold discipline. Mark had no idea. He saw the hoodie and the old laptop. He didn't see the woman who had spent the last 36 months building an empire from the ashes of her divorce settlement. He didn't know that the merger he just bragged about was being orchestrated by her holding company. "I'll be there," Elena said softly. She reached out and took the envelope. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Mark stood up, buttoning his coat. He looked down at her with pity. "Good. It'll be good for you to get out of places like this. See how the other half lives. See you Saturday, Elena." He turned and walked out, checking his reflection in the glass door before pushing into the rain. Elena watched him go. Once he was out of sight, she opened the envelope. The invitation was tacky, too much gold, too much cursive. She pulled her phone out of her pocket. It was the encrypted, secure line device. She dialed a number. "Silas," she said, when the line clicked open. "Ms. Vance, good afternoon," a crisp British voice answered. "Are we proceeding with the acquisition of Sterling Logistics?" "Yes," Elena said, a small, dangerous smile touching her lips. "But I want to expedite the final board review. And Silas, find out everything you can about a Mark Sterling. He's a mid-level director there." "Mark Sterling? Is there a problem with him?" "No problem," Elena said, watching the rain hit the window. "He just invited his boss to his wedding without realizing it. I think it's time I gave him a wedding gift he'll never forget." 2 days later, the atmosphere was drastically different. The headquarters of Helios Holdings occupied the top 10 floors of one of the newest skyscrapers in Hudson Yards. The view from the 90th floor offered a panoramic command of New York City, looking down on the ant-like cars and people below. The elevator doors, brushed steel and devoid of buttons, slid open silently. Elena Vance stepped out. Gone was the grey hoodie. Gone were the sliding glasses. Elena wore a tailored charcoal suit by Alexander McQueen, the sharp lines emphasizing her posture. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. On her wrist was a vintage Cartier tank watch, and her heels clicked against the marble floor with the rhythmic precision of a ticking clock. "Good morning, Miss Vance," the receptionist said, standing up immediately. Elena nodded once, continuing her stride toward the double-glass doors at the end of the hall. Silas, her chief of staff, fell into step beside her. Silas was a man in his 50s, impeccably dressed, who knew where all the bodies were buried because he had helped Elena dig the graves. "The Sterling Logistics acquisition papers are on your desk," Silas said, handing her a tablet. "The current board of Sterling is panicked. They know a hostile takeover is imminent, but they don't know who the buyer is. They've codenamed the buyer Project Nemesis." "Fitting," Elena murmured, glancing at the tablet. "And the personnel file I asked for?" "Here." Silas tapped the screen, bringing up Mark's face. Elena walked into her office, a cavernous space of glass and chrome, and sat behind her desk. She projected the file onto the wall screen. Name: Mark Anthony Sterling. Position: Regional Director of Supply Chain, Sterling Logistics. Salary: $185,000, SIAM plus bonuses. Performance review: ambitious but reckless, tendency to overpromise, prone to interpersonal conflicts with subordinates. "He's mediocre," Elena observed, leaning back. "He walks around acting like he owns the city, and his own performance reviews say he's barely competent. He has been boasting about the office regarding his nuptials," Silas noted, a hint of distaste in his voice. "Apparently, he's sent a company-wide email against protocol, inviting senior management. He claims he has connections to the new mystery buyers and that his wedding will be the networking event of the season." Elena laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "He says he knows the buyer? He claims the buyer is an old friend from his college days. He's using this lie to leverage a promotion to VP. Elena spun her chair toward the window, looking out at the skyline. He's digging his own grave, Silas. He thinks he's inviting a washed-up ex-wife to gloat. He thinks he's lying his way into a promotion. He has no idea that the struggling artist he divorced is the one signing his paychecks as of, when does the deal close? Friday at noon, Silas replied, 24 hours before his wedding. Elena's eyes narrowed. Flashbacks hit her, memories she usually kept locked in a mental vault. 3 years ago, the tiny apartment in Queens, Mark throwing his suitcase on the bed. I can't do this anymore, Elena. You're dragging me down. I need a partner who elevates me, not a waitress who dabbles in painting. You have no ambition. You're dead weight. She remembered begging him to stay. She remembered the humiliation of him handing her a check for $5,000, severance, he had called it, before walking out to meet Jessica in the idling Uber below. That $5,000 hadn't gone to rent. Elena had taken it, starved for a month, and invested every penny into a high-risk cryptocurrency derivative algorithm she had been coding in secret during her night shifts. It hit. Then she invested in a failing biotech firm that discovered a cure for a rare dermatitis 2 weeks later. Luck? Maybe. But mostly it was rage. Rage fueled her 20-hour workdays. Rage sharpened her instincts. In 3 years, she turned $5,000 into an empire worth $4 billion. Silas, Elena said, snapping back to the present. Accept the invitation. Silas paused. You mean, attend as... No, I will attend as Elena, the poor ex-wife. But I want you to prepare a secondary gift. I want a full audit of Mark's department. Look for embezzlement, corner cutting, HR violations. If he's reckless, there's a paper trail. And when I find it? Hold it, Elena said. Bring it to the wedding. I want the dossier in a gift box wrapped in silver paper. Ms. Vance? Silas hesitated. Are you sure? This seems personal. Usually you prefer business to be detached. Elena stood up and walked to the window, placing her hand against the cold glass. He destroyed the girl I used to be, Silas. He made me feel small, so he could feel big. I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for every person who was ever told they weren't enough. She turned back, her face hard as stone. Make sure the acquisition is finalized Friday. And tell the board of Sterling Logistics that the new owner will be making a surprise appearance at a private event on Saturday. At the wedding? Silas asked, raising an eyebrow. At the wedding? Elena confirmed. I think it's time the groom met the boss. The rehearsal dinner was held in the private atrium of Le Bernardin, one of the few restaurants in Manhattan where the waiting list was longer than most marriages. The room was a study in aggressive opulence, vaulted ceilings, teak wood accents, and walls lined with wines that cost more than a mid-sized sedan. Elena arrived precisely 7 minutes late. It was a calculated delay, long enough to be noticed, but not long enough to be rude. She had chosen her outfit with the precision of a costume designer. She wore a simple, navy blue polyester dress she'd bought at a discount outlet in New Jersey earlier that day. It didn't fit quite right around the shoulders, and the hem was an inch too long. To complete the illusion, she wore scuffed flats and carried a purse that was clearly peeling at the strap. As she entered the room, the hum of conversation didn't stop, but the eyes shifted. The guests were a collection of New York's almost elite, junior partners, social climbers, and people who leased their lifestyles. They smelled the cheapness on her instantly. Elena, you actually made it. Mark detached himself from a group of men in tuxedos. He was holding a glass of scotch, his face flushed with alcohol and adrenaline. He walked over, his hand resting patronizingly on her shoulder. The fabric of his custom Zegna suit brushed against her polyester sleeve, a contrast he seemed to relish. "I said I would come, Mark," Elena said, her voice soft, keeping her eyes lowered. "The venue is breathtaking, isn't it?" Mark beamed, gesturing around the room. "Only the best for Jessica. Speaking of which, come, you have to meet the bride." He guided her through the crowd like a showman displaying a circus oddity. They stopped at the head table, where a woman sat holding court. Jessica Thorne was undeniably beautiful in a manicured, high-maintenance way. She wore a white silk cocktail dress that clung to her like a second skin, and her finger was weighed down by a 4-carat diamond that caught the light aggressively. "Jess, babe," Mark interrupted. "This is Elena." The table went quiet. Jessica turned slowly, her eyes scanning Eleanor from her messy hair down to her scuffed shoes. A small, pitying smile curled on her lips. "Oh," Jessica said, her voice light and airy, like spun sugar laced with arsenic. "The ex-wife. Mark talks about you, occasionally." "Congratulations, Jessica," Elena said, offering a polite nod. "You look lovely." "Thank you," Jessica replied, not standing up. "Mark told me you're an artist. That's so brave. I always tell Mark it must be so freeing to not worry about ambition or the future, just living day to day, right?" A few of the bridesmaids giggled. It was a direct strike, designed to draw blood. Elena felt the sting, but she pushed it down, converting it into cold data. "She's insecure," Elena analyzed. "She needs to establish dominance because she knows Mark has a history of wandering. She's marking her territory." "It has its moments," Elena replied vaguely. "Well, grab a plate," Mark said, dismissing her now that the show was over. "The open bar is on the left. Don't be shy. I know good scotch isn't exactly in your budget these days." Elena walked away, her face burning, but her mind clear. She found a spot in the corner, nursing a glass of sparkling water. From her vantage point, she watched the room. She watched Mark laughing too loud, refilling glasses, playing the part of the benevolent king. She listened to the snippets of conversation floating nearby. 2 men in grey suits were whispering near the shrimp cocktail tower. Elena recognized one of them. Bradford Halloway, a mid-level investment banker, Mark often bragged about knowing. "Reckless," Bradford was muttering. "Mark is putting everything on this wedding. I saw the credit checks. He's leveraged to the hilt." "I thought he was getting a promotion," the other man asked. "He thinks he is," Bradford scoffed, keeping his voice low. "Sterling Logistics is being bought out. Rumor is the new ownership is going to gut middle management. Mark thinks he's safe because he knows a guy who knows a guy. But honestly, if the deal goes through tomorrow, he might be unemployed by the time he says, 'I do.'" Elena took a sip of water, hiding a smirk behind the glass. Mark clinked a spoon against his glass, calling for silence. "Everyone! Everyone!" Mark shouted, raising his scotch. "Thank you all for coming. Tomorrow, I marry the woman of my dreams. But tonight, I also want to celebrate the future. As many of you know, big things are happening at my company, a massive acquisition. And let's just say, when the dust settles, the Sterling name is going to be bigger than ever." He winked at the crowd. "To success, and to leaving the past where it belongs, in the rear-view mirror." He cast a quick, deliberate glance at Eleanor in the corner. The room erupted in applause. Jessica kissed him theatrically. Eleanor set her glass down on a passing waiter's tray. The irony was suffocating. Mark was toasting his own executioner. He was celebrating a takeover that she had orchestrated specifically to expose his incompetence. She checked her phone. A message from Silas. "The papers are finalized. The transfer of ownership executes at 09:00 a.m. tomorrow. We have also flagged the discrepancies in Mark's expense accounts. It's worse than we thought. He's been charging personal luxury travel to the logistics budget." Elena typed back, "Let him have his night. Tomorrow, reality hits." She looked at Mark one last time. He was laughing, his head thrown back, unaware that he was standing on a trap door. "Enjoy the scotch, Mark," she whispered to the empty air. "It's the last thing you'll ever own." Friday morning broke over New York City with a heavy, grey sky. The humidity had broken, replaced by a sharp, biting wind that rattled the windows of the Sterling Logistics headquarters in Midtown. On the 42nd floor, the atmosphere was frantic. Mark Sterling marched into the office at 9:15 a.m., hungover but running on adrenaline. He carried a garment bag containing his tuxedo for the ceremony the next day. He felt invincible. The dinner had been a success. Jessica was happy. Elena had looked suitably pathetic. "Good morning, Janet," he barked at his assistant, not waiting for a reply. "Get me a coffee, black, and get the florist on the line. They're trying to substitute hydrangeas for orchids, and I won't have it." "Mr. Sterling," Janet said, her voice trembling. She wasn't looking at him. She was staring at her computer screen. You need to check your email. The board just sent a Priority 1 alert." Mark rolled his eyes. "Probably just the merger announcement. I told you this was coming." He strutted into his office, tossed the tuxedo onto the leather couch, and sat down. He wiggled his mouse to wake the computer. A red banner was flashing across the top of the company intranet. "Urgent. Ownership. Transfer complete." Mark smiled. Finally. He clicked the link, expecting to see the name of the shell company his friend Bradford had rumored, Orion Group or something similar. Instead, the header read, "Helios Holdings acquires Sterling Logistics for $1.2 billion, all operations now under review by Helios executive team." Mark frowned. Helios Holdings? He hadn't heard that name. He quickly Googled it. Helios Holdings, a private equity and tech conglomerate, known for aggressive restructuring. CEO, information, private, not listed. A cold drop of sweat slid down Mark's back. This wasn't the buddy deal he had bragged about. This was a corporate shark. His office phone rang. It was Arthur Sterling, the current and now former CEO. "Mark," Arthur sounded breathless, like he'd been running. "Have you seen the news? The buyer isn't Orion, it's Helios. They bypassed the initial offer and went straight to a hostile buyout of the majority shares." I see that, Arthur," Mark stammered, trying to regain his footing. "But this is good, right? A bigger valuation?" "We don't know who they are, Mark," Arthur yelled. "They're sending an interim auditor today, at noon. They want to see the department heads. Supply chain is first on the list. That's you." Mark's stomach dropped. Supply chain. For the last 18 months, Mark had been creative with the supply chain budget. He had categorized the deposits for the Plaza Hotel wedding venue as vendor conferences. He had listed the diamond ring purchase as mineral procurement prototype. He thought he had time. He thought the friendly buyer Bradford mentioned wouldn't look too closely at the line items before Mark could move money around to cover the holes. Noon? Mark looked at his Patek Philippe. It was 9:45 a.m. "Arthur, I have a wedding tomorrow. I have a rehearsal at the church at 1. "Screw your wedding," Arthur screamed. "If you aren't in that boardroom at noon with the P&L sheets, you're fired before the ink dries. These Helios people are notoriously ruthless. They don't just fire people, they destroy them." The line went dead. Mark sat in the silence of his office. The hangover kicked in with a vengeance. His hand started to shake. He needed to cover his tracks. He began frantically typing, opening the internal ledger system. If he could just shift the vendor conference expenses to the Q4 projection column, it might look like a prepayment rather than a theft. Access denied. The screen flashed red. System locked by administrator, Helios Geo Audit Bot V4. No, 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 Mark whispered, hitting the keyboard. Come on. Across town, in the silent, air-conditioned sanctuary of the Helios Holdings skyscraper, Elena sat in front of a wall of monitors. Silas stood behind her. He's trying to access the ledger, Silas noted, watching a line of code scroll rapidly on the screen. User, M. Sterling, attempting to modify entry, -4092. Elena took a sip of herbal tea. He's panicking. He realizes the audit is locked. Do you want me to grant him access? Give him enough rope to hang himself? No, Elena said calmly. The rope is already around his neck. If we let him change it, he might claim it was a clerical error. Leaving it locked preserves the crime. She tapped a button on her desk, zooming in on a live security feed from the Sterling Logistics building. She could see Mark through the glass wall of his office. He was pacing, loosening his tie, yelling into his cell phone. Look at him, Elena said, her voice devoid of joy, but heavy with satisfaction. He's not worried about the employees. He's not worried about the company legacy. He's worried that he won't be able to pay for the champagne tomorrow. The auditor is arriving in 2 hours, Silas reminded her. Are you going? No, Elena said. I'm saving my appearance for the main event. Let the auditor sweat him. Let him think he can talk his way out of it. It will make the fall so much harder. Back at Sterling Logistics, Mark slammed his phone down. He couldn't fix the numbers. He had to bluff. He straightened his tie. He was Mark Sterling. He was a salesman. He could sell ice to an Eskimo. He would walk into that boardroom at noon, charm the auditor, claim the discrepancies were a system migration glitch, and promise to have it sorted by Monday. He convinced himself of the lie. It's just a glitch. I'm the VP. They need me. He picked up his phone and dialed Jessica. Hey, baby, he said, forcing his voice to sound smooth. Listen, slight change of plans. I might be a little late to the church rehearsal. Just some corporate shuffling with the buyout. Big money stuff. You know how it is. Mark, Jessica's voice was sharp. My father is coming to the rehearsal. You cannot be late. I won't be. I promise. I'm just wrapping up a deal that's going to buy us that summer house in the Hamptons. He hung up, wiping sweat from his forehead. At 11:55 a.m., Mark walked into the boardroom. The other department heads were there, looking pale and nervous. Arthur Sterling sat at the head of the table, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 hours. At 12 p.m. exactly, the doors opened. It wasn't Elena. It was a team of 5 lawyers in black suits, led by a woman with severe glasses and a briefcase that looked like a weapon. This was the cleanup crew of Helios Holdings. Good afternoon, the woman said. She didn't sit down. I am Director Klein. Helios Holdings has assumed full control. We are freezing all assets, all accounts, and all hiring immediately. She looked around the table, her eyes stopping on Mark. Mr. Sterling? She asked. Mark puffed out his chest. That's me, Regional Director. We have some questions regarding the vendor conference in Cabo San Lucas last month, she said, pulling a file from her case, and the purchase of a 1942 Dom Perignon crate billed to office supplies. The room went dead silent. Arthur turned to stare at Mark with horror. Mark laughed nervously. Ah, yes, Director Klein, is it? That's a complex situation. I can explain. It's part of a client retention strategy. Save it for the official deposition, Klein said coldly. However, given the wedding tomorrow, we are willing to suspend the immediate suspension pending a full review on Monday morning. We wouldn't want to ruin a family event. Mark exhaled, his knees almost buckling. They were letting him go. They were giving him the weekend. "Thank you," Mark breathed. "I assure you it's all a misunderstanding." "We shall see," Klein said, closing the file. "Monday, Mr. Sterling, 8:00 a.m. Do not be late." Mark stumbled out of the meeting 10 minutes later, feeling like he had survived a firing squad. He was safe. For 48 hours he was safe. He could get through the wedding, charm Jessica's father into a loan, and pay back the company before Monday. He could fix this. He grabbed his tuxedo and ran for the elevator. As he stepped out into the cold wind of the street, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "See you at the wedding. I have a gift for you." E. Mark frowned. "Elena. She probably got me a toaster," he muttered, hailing a cab. He had no idea that the gift was the woman who had just sent the auditors to his office. He had no idea that the noose wasn't loosened. It was just being measured for the drop. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel had been transformed into a cathedral of excess. It was a scene ripped from the pages of a bridal magazine, funded by credit debt and desperation. Thousands of white Casablanca lilies suffocated the air with their heavy, sweet scent. A string quartet played Debussy in the corner, their music floating over the heads of 200 guests who were busy whispering about the merger rumors. Mark stood at the altar. He was sweating. Despite the air conditioning being set to a crisp 68 degrees, moisture beaded on his upper lip. He dabbed it away with a silk handkerchief, flashing a nervous smile at his best man, Bradford. "Relax, man," Bradford whispered, leaning in. "You look like you're facing a firing squad." "Monday," Mark hissed back, his eyes darting to the heavy oak doors at the back of the room. "The auditors are coming back Monday. I need to talk to Senator Thorne at the reception. If he can float me a bridge loan, I can cover the books before Helios Holdings tears me apart." "Just focus on the girl," Bradford chuckled. The doors opened. The music swelled. Jessica walked down the aisle. She was a vision in a custom Vera Wang gown that cost more than Eleanor's entire college tuition. She looked triumphant, her eyes locked on Mark, or rather, on the lifestyle Mark represented. Mark forced his face into a mask of adoration. He had to play the part. He had to be the golden boy. But as Jessica approached, Mark's eyes wandered. They drifted past the senator in the front row, past the logistics partners in the middle, to the very back row, near the exit. There she was, Elena. She was sitting alone in the shadows of the mezzanine overhang. She was wearing the same ill-fitting navy dress from the rehearsal dinner. She looked small, insignificant, a relic of his past life that he had outgrown. Seeing her there, looking so out of place among the tuxedos and designer gowns, gave Mark a sudden, intoxicating rush of confidence. I won, he thought. I'm here, marrying a senator's daughter in the plaza. She's back there, counting pennies. The fear of the audit faded for a moment, replaced by pure ego. The ceremony was a blur of recited vows that meant nothing. For richer, for poorer, Mark said, his voice steady. In sickness and in health, Jessica replied, admiring her ring. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," the room erupted in polite applause. Mark kissed Jessica, but his eyes were open, looking over her shoulder at the back of the room. Elena hadn't stood up. She wasn't clapping. She was just watching him, her face completely still, her eyes like dark glass. It sent a shiver down his spine, colder than the ice in the champagne buckets waiting outside. As the couple walked back down the aisle, petals raining down on them, Mark passed Eleanor's row. He couldn't resist. He slowed down just a fraction of a second, caught her eye, and winked. It was a wink that said, "Look at what you lost." Elena didn't blink. She simply inclined her head, a gesture that looked less like a greeting and more like a judge acknowledging a defendant before sentencing. The reception was a riot of noise and crystal. Waiters in white gloves moved like synchronized swimmers, pouring vintage Dom Perignon into flutes that never seemed to empty. The centerpieces were so tall that guests had to crane their necks to see each other across the tables. Mark was 3 glasses of champagne, deep and feeling invincible again. He had cornered Senator Thorne near the ice sculpture. "So, Robert," Mark said, leaning in too close, "I've got an investment opportunity opening up next week. Short-term, high yield. I thought of you immediately." The senator, a man who could smell desperation like a shark smells blood, swirled his drink. "Not tonight, Mark. Tonight is for dancing. We can talk business when your company isn't in the middle of a hostile takeover. I read the news. Helios Holdings, wasn't it?" Mark stiffened. "It's a friendly merger, Robert. I'm actually spearheading the transition." "Is that so?" The senator looked skeptical. "Well, let's see if you survive the transition first." He patted Mark on the shoulder and walked away. Mark ground his teeth. He needed a win. He needed to feel powerful. His eyes scanned the room and landed on table 19. The reject table. It was placed near the kitchen doors, far from the head table. Elena was sitting there, picking at her salmon. Mark grabbed a microphone from the DJ stand. The room quieted down, expecting a thank you speech. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mark boomed, his voice slightly slurred, "if I could have your attention." Jessica looked up from the head table, smiling expectantly. "I want to thank you all for coming," Mark said, swaying slightly. "It means the world to us. We have the best family, the best friends." He paused, a cruel glint entering his eyes. He pointed toward the back of the room. "We even have some old friends here. Everyone, give a hand to Elena, my first wife, sitting back there by the kitchen." The room went deadly silent. Guests turned, whispering. It was incredibly tacky, a breach of social etiquette that made everyone uncomfortable. "Elena, stand up," Mark laughed into the mic. "Don't be shy. I just want everyone to see that there are no hard feelings. I invited her because I wanted her to see what true love looks like. And hey, I wanted to make sure she got a decent meal this month." A few of Mark's drunk fraternity brothers laughed. The rest of the room cringed. Jessica looked horrified, not out of empathy, but because it was embarrassing her. Eleanor slowly set down her fork. She dabbed her mouth with a napkin. She stood up, but she didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look like she was about to cry. She looked bored. She picked up her purse and began to walk toward the stage. "Oh, she's coming up," Mark jeered. "Coming to give a toast, Elena? Maybe ask for a goodie bag." Elena didn't stop. As she walked, her posture changed. The slump of the defeated ex-wife vanished. Her shoulders squared. Her chin lifted. She walked with a predatory grace that silenced the room. She reached the center of the dance floor, 10 feet from where Mark stood on the stage. "Mark," she said. She didn't have a microphone, but her voice carried clearly through the silent room. "You always did have a problem knowing when to stop." "What's that supposed to mean?" Mark sneered. "Security. I think she's had too much to drink. Escort her out." 2 large security guards in black suits stepped out from the shadows of the ballroom. Mark pointed at Elena. "Get her out of here." The guards walked past Elena. They walked right up to the stage, and they stood in front of Mark. "What are you doing?" Mark demanded. "I'm the groom. I paid for this room." "Actually," a voice interrupted, "you didn't." The general manager of the Plaza Hotel, a man named Mr. Henderson, walked onto the dance floor. He was a man who bowed to no one, yet he walked straight to Elena and bowed deeply. Ms. Vance, Mr. Henderson said, his voice trembling slightly. I apologize for the disturbance. We were waiting for your signal. Mark froze. The microphone dropped to his side. Ms. Vance? What is this? Elena turned to the general manager. Thank you, Henderson. Please bring the house lights up. I'm tired of the dark. The romantic mood lighting vanished. Harsh, bright white lights flooded the ballroom, exposing everyone. The makeup, the sweat, the fear in Mark's eyes. Elena reached up and unpinned her messy hair. It cascaded down her back in a sleek, glossy wave. She took off her glasses and tossed them onto a nearby table. She unbuttoned the top of her cheap navy dress. Gasps rippled through the room. Underneath the polyester smock, she was wearing a shimmering, silver couture gown that looked like it was woven from starlight and steel. It was a power suit disguised as a dress. You asked for a toast, Mark, Elena said, stepping closer. The security guards parted to let her pass, blocking Mark from leaving the stage. You asked if I wanted a goodie bag. No, I don't need your charity. I have my own. She snapped her fingers. The side doors burst open. Silas walked in. He wasn't alone. Behind him were 3 people. The director of HR for Sterling Logistics, the chief financial officer of Helios Holdings, and a woman holding a video camera. Silas carried a silver gift box. He walked up to Eleanor and handed it to her. What is going on? Jessica shrieked, standing up. Who are you people? You're ruining my wedding. Eleanor ignored Jessica completely. Her eyes were locked on Mark. Mark Sterling, Eleanor said, her voice ice-cold. You bragged all week about the new owner of your company. You told everyone you knew the buyer. You lied to get a promotion. You stole company funds to pay for this. She gestured around the room. This circus. I didn't, Mark stammered, his face draining of color. You wanted to meet the boss? Elena asked. She took a step onto the stage. She towered over him in her heels. I am the boss. A collective gasp went through the room. I am the CEO and majority shareholder of Helios Holdings, Elena announced, turning to the crowd. And as of yesterday morning, I am the sole owner of Sterling Logistics. Mark's knees gave way. He stumbled back, catching himself on the DJ booth. No, that's impossible. You're a waitress. You paint bad watercolors. I did, Elena said. And then you left me. You gave me $5,000 and told me I was worthless. I took that money, and I built a world that you are not allowed to live in. She handed him the silver box. Open it. I don't want to, Mark whispered. Open it, Elena commanded, her voice cracking like a whip. Mark's shaking hands lifted the lid. Inside there was no blender, no silverware. There was a single stack of documents. Mark pulled them out. The top page was a termination notice. Notice of termination for cause. Embezzlement and fraud. Underneath that was a subpoena from the district attorney's office. You're fired, Mark, Elena said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper that the microphone picked up. And since you used company funds to pay for the plaza, well, technically, this is my party now. She turned to the security guards. Please escort Mr. Sterling off the premises. The police are waiting for him in the lobby regarding the missing $200,000 from the supply chain budget. Elena, please, Mark cried out, grabbing her arm. Please don't do this. It's my wedding day. We were married. Doesn't that mean anything? Elena looked at his hand on her arm until he let go. It means everything, Mark. It means I finally got closure. She turned to the band. Play something upbeat. The groom is leaving. As the security guards dragged a screaming Mark Sterling out of the ballroom, Jessica stood alone at the head table, sobbing into her hands. The guests sat in stunned silence. Elena walked over to the champagne tower, picked up a glass, and raised it to the room. Enjoy the open bar. she said with a smile that could cut glass. I'm paying for it. The band, confused and terrified by the sudden shift in power dynamics, began to play a hesitant, low-tempo jazz standard. But no one danced. The grand ballroom of the plaza, usually a vessel for joy, felt like a crime scene, decorated with flowers. Mark's screams had faded down the hallway, cut off by the heavy oak doors swinging shut. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Jessica Thorne's weeping. She sat at the head table, her face buried in her hands. Her custom Vera Wang gown, once a symbol of her triumph, now looked like a costume for a play that had been cancelled mid-performance. Her father, Senator Thorne, stood beside her, his face a mask of purple rage, not at Elena, but at the realization that he had almost tied his family name to a fraudster. Elena stood by the champagne tower, her silver dress catching the harsh house lights. She took a slow sip of the wine. It tasted like victory, crisp and cold. She handed the glass to a passing waiter. Thank you. You can clear the tables now. Elena began to walk toward the exit, her heels clicking rhythmically on the parquet floor. To leave, she had to pass the head table. She didn't speed up. She didn't look away. You. Jessica's voice was wet and trembling. She looked up, her mascara running in dark streaks down her cheeks. You did this on purpose. You waited until today. Eleanor stopped. She turned to face the bride. The room held its breath. I didn't choose the date, Jessica, Eleanor said, her voice calm, devoid of the malice Jessica wanted to see. Mark did. Mark chose to steal from my company to pay for this wedding. Mark chose to invite me to gloat. I simply attended the event I was paid for. You humiliated me, Jessica spat, standing up. Her hands were clenched into fists. You could have fired him on Monday. You could have done this in an office. You came here to destroy me. Elena looked at Jessica, really looked at her. She saw the insecurity, the vanity, but also the genuine pain of a woman who had just realized her Prince Charming was a con artist. Jessica, Elena said softly, stepping closer. I didn't ruin your life. I saved it. Jessica blinked, taken aback. Mark is $400,000 in debt, Elena revealed, her voice low enough that only the head table could hear. He has leveraged his credit cards in your name. He has been siphoning money from his department for 6 months to buy that ring on your finger. If I had waited until Monday, you would have been legally bound to his debts. You would have been an accessory. Elena gestured to the senator. Ask your father. By arresting him before the marriage license is filed with the clerk on Monday, I gave you an out. You can annul this. You can walk away. The senator looked at Elena. He was a man who understood power dynamics better than anyone. He saw the steel in Elena's spine. He nodded, a slow, grave acknowledgement. She's right, Jessica, the senator grumbled, placing a hand on his daughter's shoulder. He played us. Miss Vance did us a favor. Jessica looked from her father to Elena. The anger drained out of her, replaced by a hollow shock. She looked down at the massive diamond ring, a ring bought with stolen money. She slid it off her finger and dropped it onto the table. It made a dull, heavy sound. He told me you were nothing, Jessica whispered, staring at the empty table. He said you were just a hurdle he had to jump over. I was, Elena said. But he forgot that hurdles are there to make you jump higher, and if you trip, you hit the ground hard. Elena turned to leave, but stopped one last time. She pulled a checkbook from her silver clutch. She quickly scribbled a signature and tore the check out. She placed it on the table next to the discarded ring. What is this? Jessica asked. This covers the cost of the venue, the catering, and the band, Elena said. The plaza shouldn't suffer because Mark is a thief, and neither should you. Consider it a wedding gift. Use the refund to buy yourself some dignity." Elena turned her back on the sobbing bride and the stunned senator. She walked through the parted sea of guests. People who had sneered at her navy dress an hour ago now looked at her with a mixture of fear and awe. Bradford, the best man, was hiding behind a centerpiece. Elena caught his eye. He turned pale and pretended to text on his phone. She pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out into the lobby. Silas was waiting for her, holding her grey trench coat. The police were already gone, having taken Mark out through the side exit to avoid the paparazzi that were beginning to gather. "Is it done?" Silas asked, helping her into the coat. "It's done," Elena said. She felt a sudden wave of exhaustion, but it was a good kind of tired, the kind that comes after a long, hard run. "The board is ready for the transition meeting on Monday," Silas noted as they walked toward the revolving doors. "And Mr. Sterling, well, the former Mr. Sterling, has been denied bail. The flight risk was deemed too high." "Good," Elena said. They stepped out into the New York night. The rain had stopped. The air was scrubbed clean, smelling of wet asphalt and ozone. The city lights reflected in the puddles, glittering like diamonds, real ones this time. Elena took a deep breath. For 3 years she had carried the weight of Mark's words. "You have no ambition? You're dead weight." Tonight, she had cut that weight loose. "Where to, Ms. Vance?" the driver asked as he opened the door of her black SUV. Elena looked back at the Plaza Hotel. She thought about the girl she used to be, the girl in the paint-stained jeans who just wanted to be loved. She didn't mourn her anymore. She thanked her. That girl had survived so this woman could rule. "Home," Elena smiled, getting into the car. "I have a merger to finish on Monday." As the car pulled away, merging into the stream of traffic, Elena Vance didn't look back. The rearview mirror was for people like Mark. Elena was only interested in the road ahead. Mark Sterling spent the next 5 years in a minimum security facility for corporate fraud. Jessica annulled the marriage 3 days later and wrote a best-selling memoir about surviving a toxic relationship. But Eleanor didn't just survive. She ascended. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about the danger of underestimating people based on where they are in life, rather than where they are going. Mark saw a struggling artist and treated her like trash. He didn't realize that rock bottom is the strongest foundation you can build on. He invited his past to his wedding, never suspecting that she was already owning his future. In the end, success truly is the best revenge. But serving it cold, in a silver dress, in front of everyone who doubted you, that is a masterpiece. And that is the story of the billionaire ex-wife. What did you think of Eleanor's revenge? Was it too harsh, or did Mark get exactly what he deserved? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have saved Jessica, or let her marry him? If you enjoyed this story of justice and drama, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new episodes every week. Thanks for watching. And remember, be careful who you step on today. They might be signing your paycheck tomorrow.